I'm Luke Wazaloo, host of Vazza San Diego. Today we had an amazing guest, Rick Vazza, on the show, the owner and founder of Driven Wealth Management. Stay tuned to hear more. Thanks so much for tuning into Vazza San Diego. I'm your host, Luke Wazaloo, and today I'm joined by Rick Vazza, the owner and president of Driven Wealth Management.
Thank you for having me, Luke.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on the show.
I'm excited to be here.
So yeah, we dove in a little bit prior to you showing up. Rick is from Boston, started at Fidelity, went to SunTrust, and then opened up Driven Wealth Management.
Yeah, so being on the East Coast, Fidelity, kind of big name up there. Absolutely. So it's not uncommon that a lot of us in that Northeast, corridor start at some point, have some experience with Fidelity.
Absolutely.
Great institution, learned a lot from them, and really enjoyed my time there. Still regularly recommend people utilize their services. Kind of hit that 5.5 year mark with them, and decided to kind of stick my neck out and see what else was out there. And fortunately had an opportunity to move in the process from Boston down to New York. And then ultimately when I left Fidelity, I moved to DC, and that's where I started up with SunTrust. And I was managing money for some clients for them.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so the West Coast, kind of when I got to the point where I was ready to launch my firm, had a nice conversation with my wife. She's from just upstate New York. So we both have that East Coast connection. No kids at the time. We had been married about a year, and we were kind of having that conversation of, well, if I can launch this, and my business, fortunately, at the time was able to be launched geographically independent. Yeah. And so we're like, where do we want to do it? And I had my aunt and uncle moved out here. They live in Bankers Hill about 15 years ago. So they're both handicapped, got really tired of the winters. We thought they were totally nuts because they literally got in a car and just left. They'd never been here, bought a condo in Bankers Hill, and they were off. And everyone thought they were crazy. And obviously, as we all do, they fell in love with the place. Absolutely. And have been in heaven ever since. So my wife and I, it was 2012 at the time, but she was just my girlfriend then. We came out to visit, and we fell in love with it. And it was just one of those things. It was kind of a recurring theme in our relationship of, San Diego, San Diego, San Diego. And checked a lot of the right boxes, I guess all the right boxes. We ended up here, where we ultimately moved, and that was in May. So been a little over a year at this point. We've loved the place so much. We just bought a place in Point Loma back in April, so we plan to be here for a while.
Nice, and it's funny you say that because I was just talking to Jen Lopez about San Diego and just the city just draws talent over here too as well, because it does. It has so much to offer, between the foods, the beach, the mountains, Mexico, the desert. It's, within a 2-hour time frame, you can go from the water to the mountains up to Julian, go snowboarding in Big Bear, go grab some tacos in, Rosarito, and be back home at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I haven't been surprised, but most of the people I've met are East Coast transplants, and it's kind of easy to figure out why. You grow up all those years just kind of assuming, this is what you deal with. You have those 6 months that are pretty tough. And then you come out here like, oh, wait, you don't need to really do that.
No, it's like December and 70 degrees out and people are swimming and, running no shirts at the beach.
So we're lucky. We both are pretty active, love being outdoors. So, it was kind of a perfect place. And like you said, we've been just extremely happy being here. And the people are really welcoming too. I kind of lucked into that, but it was one of those things I guess I didn't put as much thought into it as I probably should have when it came to the business decisions. But interestingly, what I do is very relationship driven.
Absolutely.
And San Diego is so welcoming that I've met so many people who are like, you need to talk to so-and-so. And it's interesting because I guess kind of similar to Boston, it's got, despite being a big city, a very small town feel where everyone kind of knows each other. And that's been really helpful as far as making connections and just how welcoming everyone's been. So also kind of the niceness of the people that live here is a great factor.
I feel like it's not about where you grew up and kind of all these cliques down here, because we are that melting pot of the country. So everybody, for the most part, is from somewhere else.
And I was going to say, we can be a little that way in Boston, so I can appreciate the differences.
I've been to some Charger games where, Eagles are coming to town or Patriots fans, and it's a different animal.
Yeah, so it's been an awesome experience. I really loved it.
Nice. So what kind of was your main motivating factor to starting your company?
So I was very fortunate. Just kind of quick context, I really never thought I'd go into finance. My grandfather owned a successful real estate company.
Yep.
My dad and uncle both
Most
worked
of the
for him.
development side?
Yeah, on the development side. So I've always really loved like going out to job sites. Actually, I was just with my dad all weekend. I was out in Massachusetts for a wedding and we were hitting job sites. Like I've just always loved that part of, the real estate process. And I always assumed I would go into that. But I was in college really right as the recession hit a peak. And as just unfortunate timing would have it, my grandfather passed away unexpectedly during that period, and he had done no financial planning. So my dad really got caught holding the bag, and I really watched him spend what should have been the prime of his career, that 10-year period just in court after court after court. And he couldn't do deals. I mean, it was just a whole nightmare. As if that wasn't enough, there was a lot of family fallout too, just with how the money got handled and all of that. And so being the oldest grandson, I had really kind of a firsthand look into that. I was old enough where, my parents were talking to me a lot about what was going on. And that was just a motivator for me. I was like, this is something that I'm really now passionate about. And so kind of just hit the books extremely hard right out of school. Was fortunate to get some credentials that really matter in our industry. So I became a chartered financial analyst and then followed that with the certified financial planner designation. Yep. And so those kind of helped me rise through the ranks fairly quickly. So I found myself at like 24 years old advising high net worth clients in New York, and I was kind of that pinch me moment of like, how did this really happen? But I was fortunate. I loved what I did. But as I kept progressing, I did notice I noticed some changes that were happening in the industry, and then also some pain points that I thought I could address. So without going on a whole tangent, just kind of quickly, our industry has always really been built on this model of what we call assets under management. Okay. So traditionally an advisor is paid based off of the money they're managing on behalf of their clients. And so you can kind of get a quick idea of, well, obviously the more assets someone has, typically the more attractive they are as a client. Absolutely. And kind of the industry standard is 1% on an annual basis is what they'll charge. So just quick math, $1 million portfolio, they're probably charging about $10,000 a year. Yep. And so, I found myself, especially because of my analyst background with what I had learned from the CFA, it was really involved on balance sheets, financial statements, really digging into the weeds and understanding how the finances work. And as a manager, the investment landscape has changed so dramatically, really wasn't using any of that anymore. Well, what used to happen, years ago, and I would really say the internet has changed so much of this, because previously you'd have people who were really able to, make an easy example, take a look at Coke versus Pepsi and dig into their numbers, talk to their management team, fly out to headquarters, get a sense of operations, and you could likely make a pretty informed decision of, hey, we like this one at this price point better than the other. And so kind of quickly, that's called active management. And that was really Fidelity was a staple back then of having great managers and outperforming the market, if you will. And we had the rise of the internet where all of a sudden information is accessible to everyone.
Just a whole abundant.
And there were some regulatory changes where information had to be made accessible. Basically, some things happened where also it's ultra competitive, right? Because these people are typically getting paid a lot, so it attracts a lot of talent. Yep. That talent's all now competing against each other. And all of a sudden that started to really change, where it wasn't as much stock picking and picking one company over the other, but instead just allocating money towards these large segments of the market and trusting that over time that market would work on itself. So we weren't really digging into the balance sheet, P&L, really any sort of financial statements as much anymore. And I had learned all that information, and I was like, I really want to use this. I worked really hard to do it. And it was interesting because a lot of the people I would gravitate towards were former business owners, people who had gone through some sort of liquidity event, sold their business, had money that they now wanted us to manage. And I guess being the young guy, they'd love talking to me about, their successes, their failures, all of the things.
Glory days.
Yeah, exactly. And I loved that. I'd be like, at the edge of my seat just listening to anything they had to say. And I then quickly realized, we're all waiting for them after the liquidity event, but my analytical skills could really have helped them during that time where they were growing their business, right? There were all of these things that they were struggling with that you're kind of in this interesting loophole because you maybe can't afford a full-time CFO, but you need financial advice and what's going on there. So anyways, I had this kind of epiphany of, well, why not stop worrying about the AUM? launch a business where I can work with the owners as more of a consultant and help them on the finances,
Gotcha.
really help them grow their largest asset. And again, most of them have 70 to 90% of their net worth in the business at the time. So there are no assets anyways, so you can't really charge that way, but you could charge the business a consulting fee. Actually works as a nice win-win because they can write it off as an expense. And then also use that financial planning skill set to say, well, hey, as we're growing that large asset, let's make sure we're not missing anything on your personal side. Let's capture it all onto your personal balance sheet. So it does involve some education. It's not really traditional when people think of financial advisor, but I kind of describe it as the intersection of business and personal financial planning. And I totally get to nerd out and love the work. So it's awesome for me. And in the process, you get to meet amazing people. You get to talk to them about their business. And I mean, there's little things I found as rewarding as like helping someone grow, this thing they're so passionate about, and really so many people are relying on.
It's their baby. That so much blood, sweat, and tears goes into it.
Exactly. So it's really rewarding, and I've really loved it. And so thankfully, a very supportive wife. I came to her with this kind of crazy idea. Again, I knew I was starting from scratch, so geography didn't matter, and we were like, where do we want to do it?
We're going to plant long-term roots.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then so we ended up here, kind of, worst case scenario, like if we don't love it, we'll move back east. And I mean, fortunately, it's been, we thought the honeymoon effect might wear off after a while. It's like only gets better, it seems. Yeah.
Absolutely. And when you're talking about the business owners, was there a common thread that a lot of these business owners weren't managing properly with their businesses?
Well, I think one of the things I always tend to start with when I'm sitting down with them is cash flow can be very reactive. So, and it's the same with our personal finances in most cases, but what I find with a lot of people, it's especially business owners, there's a lot of fires to put out, right? There's a lot of things pulling you in different directions. And again, same thing with our personal finances, right? There's kids, there's student loans, there's all types of things.
Yeah.
So the cash flow can feel very reactive. So one of the things that I usually try to start with is just getting a strategic framework in place for the cash flow. So it's not just, hey, that money hits the account, pay all the bills, what's left over is great. It's much more of, hey, as that money's coming in, let's really figure out a percentage of every dollar flowing through into the right bucket. Whether that's the emergency fund, your salary, after all, you do want to typically get paid, a growth fund to reinvest back into the business, whether that's new employees, capital investment, expansion, whatever that may be. And then also don't forget about like a 401k plan. And I usually, that one can take a little bit of time to get their heads around because you don't have control over the stock market, you have control over your business. The returns typically of your business are going to be higher than the stock market. But what I like to describe it more as is basically you're pre-funding your exit plan. So in case you don't sell the business, this is a really optimal vehicle to utilize to start stashing some money away, effectively, so that if, God forbid, you aren't able to transition as effectively as you'd like, and statistically speaking, the chances of doing that are quite low. So this is a nice vehicle to do so. So as you kind of start breaking out what those buckets look like, that really kind of reassesses, oh, okay, now I see how this is all working together, and it can really actually help even more so with long-term planning because you can kind of start to build that bridge of, okay, how does the cash flow get you to where you want to be over the next 3, 5, 10 years?
Gotcha. It's really kind of just helping them create that map and tell them, hey, allocate X amount of percentage to marketing, et cetera.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised as we dig into the financials of like what comes out of it. So I was working with someone recently where their compensation structure was really hurting the business because it just, the owners, what it came out was they were really paying for the lifestyle of the employees without getting any sort of profit. And we're like, you didn't start a business.
Exactly.
So essentially the way they got into a bit of a jam was they were providing a really high and a nice base salary that was attractive, but then there were also some incentive payouts that basically made it impossible for them to make any money because the employee was capturing all of that value.
Gotcha.
And so, of course, they wanted to be, generous to their employees. They wanted to create a great culture, but at the same time, they started a business for a reason.
All the risk.
Yeah, exactly. And so what was nice was by able to kind of digging into the financials and really showing that. And it was interesting getting the team to see, too, what's going on exactly. It makes it a much more empowering conversation when you're able to say, like, wait, we have the numbers to support why we're doing this. We're not just, cutting your salary or making these dramatic changes because we don't like you. It's, hey, we really have a reason behind it. So that's just one example. But it tends to be, with owners, there's 100 different things they could choose from that they want to really focus on. So it's nice is by looking at the actual financials, just helping them figure out, hey, what are the 2 or 3 that if you really laser in on are going to move the needle the most?
Absolutely.
That's an empowering feeling. And so those are the things that I get to nerd out on and really enjoy. And it's great because I work like really hand in hand with the accountants and the bookkeepers. Like it's not trying to replace them, but it's more of, when the accountant is doing the record keeping, if you will, kind of keeping track of what happened. I view my job as more forecasting out and doing the projections. And so we work really well as like a tandem. So it's kind of fun also getting to partner.
Absolutely. Is there a particular industry or business or size of business that is your avatar type client? Yeah,
I've tended to work like $10 million in revenue and below. I think as you start getting to that figure, you can really start thinking about more of an in-house CFO. So below that threshold, economically speaking, it can be really practical. As far as industries go, I hate the generic, like, you can help anyone, but fortunately numbers are numbers, so it is very interchangeable. Yep. But where I've found initial interest is kind of in 2 areas. One is the medical space. So think veterinarians, dentists, doctors, professionals. And the reason for that is, and you can kind of think of it, the law space is very similar. Anyone who has a very technical expertise where they've gone through a lot of schooling and really learned how to do a particular skill set very well, but then they're thrown into starting a business. Right, and so sometimes that can be very overwhelming. They're not
operators. They know their trade very, very well,
exactly.
But they don't know how to run a business necessarily.
Absolutely. So, it's not just that I'm their pure solution, but what's great is being able to bring in a team of professionals who all have an expertise, and they can really help and get in that lane where the owner needs help and can kind of offload some of that really daunting decision making to a professional as opposed to digging through hours and hours of Google, which is really the alternative. So those work really well, kind of any type of service professional. And then also I've found franchises can be great partners.
Really?
That one I wouldn't have known in advance.
I wouldn't think that would be the case, but that's interesting.
Yeah, it has been interesting. And what I found is a couple of things. Number one, a franchise owner has a huge incentive to get an ROI back because usually they've laid an investment into that franchise, and it's usually a pretty sizable one too. And so whether that came directly out of their own pocket or they got some sort of small business loan, there's something really that is incentivizing, I need to figure this out rather quickly. Yeah. And where headquarters typically does a great job with operational support, most of the financial decisions, if not all, are typically left at the local level. So anything from as far as a 401k plan, that's usually done at the local level, to even pricing can be done at the local level. So there's a lot of the financial decision making that actually gets put on the owner. And again, they didn't necessarily think of all of that as they got the idea of like, hey, I have this entrepreneurial itch that I want to scratch. This franchise seems like a great opportunity for me, but there's typically some things that they're now taking on that maybe weren't the first things they thought of when it came to business ownership. Yes. So that can be great. And again, the outsourced kind of consultant model works really well because it's cost effective in that manner.
Pay as you need it, essentially, instead of hiring somebody full time.
Exactly.
And they just don't have the overhead expense.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, what's good about that too is there's typically support staff too that's helping with those businesses. So I think by being able to get kind of that team, and I think we talked about like the ship in the right direction, you can really start to see as it clicks.
Kind of help educate them to do a lot of the work, and then when they have kind of higher level questions, bring you in there. Hey, this is how it's done. Let them.
Exactly. And what I've found, there's kind of those 2 buckets that people tend to fall into. There's either like the one example of, hey, I've been at this for like 5 years now. I really thought I was going to start to be drawing something from the business, but instead I'm actually having to keep putting money in or breaking even. What's going on with my profitability? And so then I can come in and really dig into that and help them figure that out. Again, identifying those 2 or 3 factors to get to a good profitability state. Or there's that really hard charging growth oriented person where it's like, hey, things are going well and I want to keep growing, but now I have so many moving pieces. I need something more strategic to kind of help with that decision making. And those are kind of like the 2 different areas that people tend to fall into.
Okay. Yeah. What about like a business owner? So my industry, real estate. We don't really have, for the most part, there are a lot of people that maximize and are able to sell their practice or do that. But I would say 90% of the people out there don't have a sellable asset when they retire. What would you recommend for somebody like that? like an SEP to kind of start putting money into it, because reinvesting it isn't always the best ROI necessarily. Again,
Yeah.
I'm kind of on a broad level.
Yes. No, and I think that's fair. And that is often the pushback you get on those types of retirement plans.
Yeah.
And I totally understand it. And I don't even try to push back on that, because now, especially as a business owner myself, I know, hey, I'd rather put money typically back into my business than set it aside.
Absolutely.
So I use that same concept of, hey, worst case scenario, it's a great vehicle to pre-fund that exit strategy in case. And I think especially for real estate professionals, a great example, to your point, if you don't have that enterprise where someone can really buy into it, I mean, if the entire business is based around you operating it.
Because a lot of people, they're just solo agents, and when they retire, maybe they'll refer out business and get some referral fees for a while, but eventually that's going to die off to where it's not like, hey, they don't have the processes and the systems that are like, here is my process and system in my database.
Exactly.
I want to acquire that.
And I always tell people, like, you want to put yourself in the buyer's shoes too, because as a buyer, like, is that attractive to me that I'm just hoping maybe you're going to be...
Here's 1,000 contacts.
Yeah, right? So obviously what I'm willing to pay as the buyer is not going to be nearly as close if you had a full team and really you could be removed and I wouldn't lose as much from the operating
Really
cost.
just buying goodwill in a database.
Exactly. So I think the same type of framework works, as applicable. One of the things, though, that I think is even more of an emphasis is making sure that you're capturing all of that onto your personal balance sheet. So a lot of the times, I mean, whether it's real estate or any type of commission-based job where you have kind of variability in income, it's really important to get an idea of what that cash flow system looks like so that you can start building your buckets and having that money spill in. And I think that's also empowering to any sort of sales-based role, because you can kind of have that baseline, okay, if I do X amount of deals this year, which is kind of my baseline figure, how does that spill over and what would that look like? And then, of course, anything beyond that is gravy. And whether that's spilling into a growth bucket where you're reinvesting back into your business.
Marketing dollars to continue to grow it,
or if you're not at that point, it's just, hey, now I have a higher salary that I can go on an extra trip, pay down, whatever it may be. But I think having that kind of baseline figure is always really helpful. And then kind of call it the gravy, the cherry on top, whatever that may be, if you close a few extra deals, whatever. But I think that always tended to work really well with any of the sales professionals we worked with.
Very nice. And it's my understanding you have a kind of a 10-step program coming out too as well. Want to dive into that a little bit? Yeah,
so what we were looking to do, and it's funny, I met a friend who became a quick friend out in San Diego, and we were kind of venting on how difficult it can be to be a business owner. And kind of as I was talking to you before, I love finance, I love financial planning, but there is all of these other things that also come with it. So whether that's, forming the right entity for your business, the marketing that comes with it, establishing a website, all of the things that come with that, SEO, commercial insurance.
Wearing a million hats, it is.
Exactly. So
how do you juggle, rub your stomach, pat your head all at the same time? It's impossible.
And on top of that, you're then stuck in a catch-22 of, okay, well, I can either Google this and spend hundreds, if not thousands of hours doing that. And again, time is money. So how much time and money am I wasting doing that could otherwise be spent on business development? Or I'm hiring 10 different professionals and I have to pay their fee and I'm a new business. Can I afford that? So we really found there was no great answer. You're kind of one of two extremes. So what we decided was, well, what if we could put together a course that could literally walk someone step by step through these different processes.
Like a how-to guide, essentially.
Literally, exactly.
A lot of times you read in books, but it's not like, okay, what website, where exactly do I go?
Exactly. And with the video kind of worksheet concept, we were like, well, now you can literally follow along. Like, don't go to the next section until you finished all of the things we just told you to do.
Finish chapter 1.
Yeah, exactly. And the beautiful thing of it was we were able to attract subject matter experts to speak to each of those points. So instead of just having me play guru on all of these things, it was, well, I'll talk finance because that's my lane. But for the other lanes, let's get actual subject matter experts that do this every single day. And they have the same pain point. We'd love to help. Of course we want to, but we also have businesses to run. So you're in this kind of difficult place where you want to be able to help. And so that was a great attraction to them where they're like, oh, you're going to be able to offer this at a great price point? Of course I'd be interested. So we got some amazing people. And honestly, I think it's going to be a huge value add to anyone who's looking looking to launch a business, I mean, we're just going to take them through all of the pain points we went through. And it's funny, as we were making it, we're like, God, I wish we had this when we were starting ours. So that was a good feeling when you're like, okay, yeah, that'll be valuable.
And if they want to take a look at the course, what's the best way for them?
Well, the course will be launching January 1st. And so we'll have everything kind of running through my website. And it's actually fun because the website developer is actually updating my website now too. So they're going to get to see a nice before and after from his professional. But I'm just drivenwm.com, so drivenwealthmanagement.com. And everything will be right through there. And then all the social media, drivenwm, so we kind of keep everything easy. Yeah.
Perfect. Love it. And so I know, kind of getting off business topic, you're a huge foodie. Love food. I read some of your stuff about a ramen burger, which I've never heard of that. That sounds
amazing.
Yeah,
it is.
It like raw ramen noodles,
No.
or do they cook it and then?
So I've actually made it now since trying it. It's surprisingly not as hard as it sounds. But there's a place called Smorgasburg in Brooklyn, and it's awesome. They have all of these different vendors that come. And when I first went, there was always this line. It was like an hour-long line for the ramen burger.
Yep.
And normally I'm like, I'm not waiting an hour for this. But it was like, all right, after like 5 times of seeing it, I have to try it. Yeah. And so what they do is they boil the ramen like normal, right? So you cook it. And then they pack it into like almost like a muffin tin can. So you kind of squish
It's like
it
a patty, almost like making the bun.
Exactly, yeah. And that's exactly what it serves. It's as the bun. And then you put it in overnight so it kind of cools down. And then the next day you would grill it so kind of harden it on the ends. So that it forms just an amazing bun. And then when you put the burger in, they do the soy sauce, like all the sauce with it. It was just incredible. And it's understandable why they have such a line. So yeah, we'll try and hit things like that. And
what about San Diego?
San Diego doesn't have a shortage either.
Yeah. What are the top maybe 3 spots? Even 1, 2.
So living in Point Loma, I'll do a couple plugs in the Point Loma OB area. So we pretty much start almost every weekend. It's funny now that they know us at Val's Coffee Corner in OB. So we'll hit there for coffee and usually an acai bowl.
Nice.
That's probably our favorite acai bowl in the area. Mike's Taco is an OB. For a burrito, I usually am taking people there when they're coming out to visit. The surf and turf one is just my favorite.
I've never had the surf and turf.
Yeah, it's really good. And then rounded out, OB Noodle House is usually where we'll do dinner with friends when they're coming in, and that's kind of the full day of OB. You got breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Boom, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. There is a lot of good food in OB too as well.
And that, that's just there. I mean, that's not to say we love it, Little Italy. We'll go to Liberty Station all the time. Yeah. Shelter Island is like another little hidden area.
The new market down in Little Italy is phenomenal. The farmers market in the Liberty Station, and then the farmers market in Little Italy, I would say is by far best in San Diego.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. I was telling you we were in France for like 10 days, and we had our share of great food. But my wife and I were just like, I can't wait to get back and just pound a burrito. Like I don't know. It's just we have great stuff out here, and it's I don't know. It's great.
Yeah, I'm a huge Mexican food, taco food guy too. Italian and Mexican food, I can't get enough of it.
It's funny, my aunt, who I was saying, so I guess now it's been more than 15 years, but who moved out here, doesn't like Mexican food. So it was funny when I came out, every time I get with her, I always forget, and I have to remember, how do you do that living here?
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny, but she always jokes about it.
That's too funny. My dad's originally from Poland, moved to Chicago. My mom's born and raised San Diego. And my mom went out and visited him like when they were dating, and they were like, "Hey, let's go get some Mexican food." And my dad's like, "Okay," brings her to Taco Bell.
Didn't Taco Bell start out here though?
I don't know, but in Chicago, local? I guess you want some good Polish sausages and brats and stuff. But yeah, pierogies out there are amazing.
Yeah, my brother actually lives in Chicago, so it's always fun when we get to visit him. I mean, they have no shortage of delicious food either. Yeah. I guess most of the major cities now. Yeah, everyone kind of has their little food scene, and it's just unique to the area. But that's one of the great things about it. It kind of has that, flavor of the city, which is awesome.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. If you want to connect with, what would be the best way to connect with you, Rick?
I'd say visit our website, again, drivenwm.com. All things social media are drivenwm as well. Try to make it easy on everyone. And then I personally have my own at Rick Vazza, which is easy to follow as well.
Well, perfect. Again. Well, Well, thank you so much for joining us today on Wazza Up San Diego. If you have any questions or suggestions for future guests, please feel free to email me at wazzupsandiego@gmail.com, and I will see you next week.